On the outskirts of the small, mist-laden town of Ravenwood stood an imposing structure, long abandoned and shrouded in mystery. The old orphanage, known to the locals as Ravenwood Home for Children, had been deserted for decades, its once vibrant laughter and play now replaced by eerie silence and crumbling walls. The building, with its towering spires and Gothic architecture, loomed over the surrounding forest, casting long shadows that danced ominously in the moonlight. The town's children, warned by their parents, dared not venture near the orphanage. Stories of ghostly apparitions and strange sounds at night kept them away. Yet, for as long as anyone could remember, it had been a place of dark fascination, a testament to the town's forgotten past. One summer, a group of 4 adventurous friends decided to unravel the mystery of the old orphanage. Jack, the ringleader, was a tall, lanky teenager with a penchant for urban exploration. His best friend, Emily, was a fiery redhead with an insatiable curiosity and a knack for solving puzzles. Liam, the quiet but strong member of the group, had an innate sense of direction and an unflinching resolve. Lastly, there was Sophie, a petite girl with a talent for sketching and a deep love for history. The group gathered at their usual meeting spot in the town library, poring over old maps and newspaper clippings. Emily, always the researcher, had uncovered a trove of information about the orphanage's history. It had been established in the late 1800s by a wealthy philanthropist, Samuel Blackwood, who mysteriously disappeared shortly after its completion. The orphanage was known for its progressive approach to childcare, but rumors of cruel treatment and strange experiments began to surface, leading to its closure in the early 1900s. With backpacks filled with supplies and hearts pounding with anticipation, the friends set out one misty morning towards the old orphanage. The forest path was overgrown, the thick foliage almost swallowing them as they made their way through. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and the only sounds were the distant calls of birds and the rustling of leaves underfoot. As they approached the orphanage, the enormity of the building became more apparent. Its windows were dark and empty, like soulless eyes staring into the void. Vines had claimed much of the exterior, winding their way up the walls and into the broken windows. The wrought iron gate, once grand, now hung precariously from its hinges. Jack pushed the gate open with a loud creak, and the friends stepped into the overgrown courtyard. The atmosphere was thick with an unsettling stillness, as if the building itself was holding its breath, waiting. They made their way to the front door, which was slightly ajar, and entered the dimly lit foyer. Inside, the air was cool and musty. Dust motes floated lazily in the beams of sunlight that filtered through the cracked windows. The walls were lined with faded portraits of solemn-faced children and stern-looking caretakers. The furniture, covered in dust and cobwebs, hinted at a time when the orphanage was full of life. Emily produced a flashlight from her backpack and handed it to Jack, who took the lead. They explored the ground floor, finding nothing but abandoned rooms filled with decaying furniture and remnants of a bygone era. It wasn't until they reached the back of the building that they found something intriguing, a large, ornate door with a rusted padlock. "This must be it," Jack whispered, his voice echoing in the empty hallway. "Do you think it leads to the basement?" Sophie asked, her voice tinged with excitement and fear. "Only one way to find out," Jack replied, producing a pair of bolt cutters from his bag. With a loud snap, the padlock broke and the door creaked open, revealing a dark staircase descending into the unknown. The air that wafted up from the depths was cool and carried a faint, metallic smell. Jack switched on his flashlight and began the descent, the others following close behind. The staircase seemed to go on forever, winding deeper and deeper into the earth. The walls, made of rough-hewn stone, were damp and covered in patches of moss. The oppressive silence was broken only by the echo of their footsteps and the occasional drip of water. At the bottom of the stairs, they found themselves in a vast underground chamber. The air was colder here, and the flashlight beams barely penetrated the darkness. As they moved forward, their lights revealed old, rusted machinery and rows of metal beds, their frames twisted and broken. "This must have been some sort of infirmary," Liam said, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily shone her light on the far wall, revealing a series of doors, each with a small, barred window. She approached one and peered inside, gasping at what she saw. The room contained a small bed, a wooden chair, and a series of strange, archaic medical instruments. But what caught her attention was the writing on the walls, desperate messages scratched into the stone by tiny hands. "Help us," one read. Another, more chilling, simply said, "They're watching." The friends exchanged uneasy glances, their sense of adventure giving way to a growing sense of dread. They continued to explore, discovering more rooms, each more disturbing than the last. They found journals filled with incoherent scribbles, diagrams of strange devices, and more messages pleading for help. As they moved deeper into the labyrinthine tunnels, they stumbled upon a door different from the others. It was made of heavy iron and adorned with strange symbols. Jack tried the handle, but it was locked tight. "Maybe there's a key somewhere," Sophie suggested, her voice trembling. Liam spotted a small alcove nearby, filled with old books and papers. Among them, he found a rusty key, its shape matching the lock on the iron door. With a deep breath, Jack inserted the key and turned it. The door swung open with a groan, revealing a narrow passageway lined with flickering torches. "This doesn't feel right," Emily said, her instincts screaming at her to turn back. But Jack was already moving forward, his curiosity overriding his fear. The passageway led to a circular chamber, its walls covered in more of the strange symbols. In the center of the room was a large stone altar, stained dark with what looked like dried blood. "There's something written here," Sophie said, pointing to an inscription on the altar. Emily stepped closer, her flashlight illuminating the ancient text. "It's in Latin," she said, translating it slowly. "Here lies the key to the darkness below. Beware the shadows, for they hold the secrets of the lost." As she finished reading, a cold wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing the torches and plunging them into darkness. Panic set in as they fumbled for their flashlights, the beams cutting through the blackness. "We need to get out of here," Liam said, his voice steady but urgent. They retraced their steps, but the passage seemed longer than before, the walls closing in on them. The oppressive darkness seemed to breathe, and faint whispers echoed around them. Finally, they reached the iron door, but when they tried to open it, it wouldn't budge. "It's locked again," Jack exclaimed, frantically jiggling the handle. "How is that possible?" Emily cried, her voice shaking. Liam tried the key, but it wouldn't turn. They were trapped. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and the air grew colder. Suddenly, the walls seemed to shift, revealing hidden passages and shadowy figures. The friends huddled together, their flashlights flickering. In the dim light, they saw the outlines of children, their faces pale and eyes hollow. The ghosts of the orphanage had awoken. "You shouldn't have come here," one of the apparitions whispered, its voice echoing with sorrow and anger. "We were only looking for answers," Sophie said, her voice barely audible. "The answers you seek lie below," the ghost replied, pointing to the altar in the chamber. Reluctantly, they returned to the circular chamber. The symbols on the walls seemed to glow faintly, and the air hummed with an unnatural energy. Jack approached the altar, his hands shaking, and found a hidden compartment underneath. Inside was an old, leather-bound book and a small, ornate key. "This must be it," he said, holding up the key. As he did, the ground beneath them rumbled, and a hidden trapdoor opened in the floor, revealing another staircase descending even deeper into the earth. "We have to go down," Emily said, her voice filled with determination. With the ghosts watching silently, the friends descended once more into the heart of the orphanage's darkest secrets. The air grew colder, the darkness more oppressive. At the bottom of the stairs, they found themselves in a vast cavern, its walls lined with ancient, crumbling bookshelves and strange artifacts. In the center of the cavern was a massive stone door, covered in the same symbols they had seen before. Jack inserted the key into the lock, and with a grinding noise, the door slowly opened, revealing a hidden sanctuary. Inside, they found a large, ornate desk covered in papers, maps, and strange devices. A figure sat behind the desk, its face obscured by shadows. As they approached, the figure raised its head, revealing the face of Samuel Blackwood, the long-lost philanthropist. "You've come far," he said, his voice echoing in the cavern. "But the secrets you seek are not what you think." The orphanage was a front, a means to an end. What lies below is a portal to another world. The friends stood in stunned silence, grappling with the gravity of Blackwood's words. The air was thick with anticipation and fear, each of them considering the implications of stepping through the portal. Emily was the first to speak. "If what he's saying is true, we can't just walk away. We need to know what's on the other side." Jack nodded, his curiosity piqued. "We came here for answers, and we can't turn back now." Sophie and Liam exchanged uneasy glances, but finally nodded in agreement. The group approached the portal, its surface shimmering with an eerie, otherworldly light. As they stepped through, a cold sensation washed over them, and they felt themselves being pulled into a void. The world around them shifted, the cavern dissolving into darkness. They emerged into a landscape unlike any they had ever seen. The sky was a swirling mass of dark clouds, and the ground beneath their feet was barren and cracked. Strange, twisted trees reached out like skeletal hands, and the air was filled with the distant sound of wailing. "This place, it feels wrong," Sophie whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. They moved cautiously, their flashlights cutting through the thick gloom. As they ventured deeper into this strange realm, they saw shadows moving at the edge of their vision, disappearing whenever they tried to get a closer look. Eventually, they came upon a massive, crumbling structure that mirrored the orphanage they had just left. It was as if they had stepped into a dark, twisted reflection of Ravenwood. The building loomed over them, its windows glowing with an eerie light. "We need to find out what's inside," Jack said, leading the way to the entrance. The door creaked open, revealing a long, dimly lit hallway. The walls were covered in strange symbols, similar to those they had seen in the underground chamber. As they explored the twisted corridors, they found more evidence of the orphanage's dark past. Rooms filled with rusty medical equipment, bizarre experiments, and ghostly apparitions of children trapped in perpetual torment. In one room, they found a series of journals that belonged to Samuel Blackwood. As Emily read through them, a horrifying picture began to emerge. Blackwood had discovered the portal and had been conducting experiments to harness its power. He believed that by doing so, he could unlock the secrets of eternal life and unimaginable power. But his experiments had gone terribly wrong, resulting in the suffering of countless children and the creation of this twisted parallel world. "We have to find a way to close the portal," Liam said, his voice resolute. "We can't let this place continue to exist." As they delved deeper into the orphanage, they found a large, circular room at its heart. In the center of the room was a massive stone pedestal, covered in the same symbols that had been haunting them. Atop the pedestal lay an ancient, glowing artifact, a crystal pulsating with dark energy. "This must be the source," Sophie said, her eyes wide with awe and fear. Jack approached the pedestal, his hand hovering over the crystal. If we destroy this, maybe we can close the portal and end all of this. As his fingers brushed the crystal, a surge of energy shot through him, and visions of the orphanage's dark history flooded his mind. He saw the experiments, the suffering, and the moment Blackwood opened the portal, unleashing the horrors that now plagued both worlds. With a determined look, Jack grasped the crystal and pulled it from the pedestal. The ground beneath them trembled, and the walls began to crack. The dark energy from the crystal intensified, and a vortex of swirling shadows erupted from the pedestal. "Hold on!" Liam shouted, grabbing onto the nearest support. The vortex grew, pulling everything towards it with a powerful force. The friends clung to each other, their determination unwavering. Jack raised the crystal high and, with all his strength, slammed it against the pedestal. The crystal shattered, releasing a blinding light that engulfed the room. When the light faded, the friends found themselves back in the underground chamber of the real Ravenwood orphanage. The air was still, and the oppressive darkness was gone. They looked around, realizing that they had succeeded. The portal was closed, and the twisted parallel world was no more. Exhausted but relieved, they made their way back up the winding staircase to the surface. As they emerged into the sunlight, they felt a sense of peace and closure. The orphanage, once a place of darkness and despair, now seemed like a distant memory. "We did it," Emily said, her voice filled with a mix of triumph and sorrow. "Yeah," Jack replied, looking back at the orphanage one last time. "We did." With their adventure behind them, the friends walked back to Ravenwood, forever changed by the secrets they had uncovered and the darkness they had faced. They knew that some mysteries were best left forgotten, but they also knew that their bond had been forged in the crucible of that darkness, and nothing would ever break it. The friends spent the next several months working closely with Agnes Blackwood. They pored over old maps, diaries, and cryptic notes that had been preserved by the Blackwood family for generations. The deeper they dug, the more they realized how interconnected Samuel Blackwood's experiments were with other historical events and places around the world. One evening, as they sat around Agnes's cozy living room, a particularly intriguing document caught Emily's attention. It was an old, tattered journal with the Blackwood crest embossed on the cover. Inside, detailed accounts of other locations where Samuel had attempted to open portals were meticulously recorded. One entry, dated 1887, described an abandoned asylum in Scotland that Samuel believed to be a nexus point for supernatural activity. "This asylum," Emily said, her eyes wide with excitement. "It's described in detail here." Samuel believed it held the key to controlling the portals. Jack leaned over to read the journal entry. "If we could find this place, we might uncover more about how to permanently seal these portals." Liam nodded thoughtfully. "And prevent anyone else from trying to open them." Sophie, sketching the asylum based on the descriptions in the journal, looked up. "It sounds dangerous, but we can't let this go. We've come this far." Agnes agreed. "You must be careful." Samuel's work attracted attention from powerful, dangerous people. "If you're going to Scotland, you need to be prepared for anything." With Agnes's blessing and armed with the knowledge they had gathered, the friends made their plans. They booked flights to Scotland and arranged to meet with local historians and paranormal investigators who could assist them. Upon arriving in Scotland, the group was struck by the stark, rugged beauty of the landscape. The asylum, known locally as Dunvegan House, was located in the remote Highlands, far from any major city. They rented a car and drove through the winding, misty roads, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. Dunvegan House was even more imposing than they had imagined. The stone building, covered in ivy and partially collapsed, stood on a hill overlooking a dark, brooding forest. The air was thick with an unsettling quiet, broken only by the distant calls of crows. "This place is definitely creepy," Sophie said, shivering as they approached the entrance. Jack pushed open the heavy wooden door, which groaned in protest. Inside, the asylum was a maze of crumbling corridors and decaying rooms. The air was damp and cold, and every step echoed ominously. Using the journal as their guide, they navigated through the labyrinthine halls. Strange symbols were carved into the walls, similar to those they had seen in the orphanage. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became, as if the very walls were closing in on them. "This way," Emily said, pointing to a narrow staircase descending into the darkness. The staircase led to a large underground chamber, eerily similar to the one beneath Ravenwood Orphanage. In the center stood another stone pedestal, this one with a large, cracked crystal resting on top. "This is it," Jack said, approaching the pedestal. "But the crystal's already broken." Liam examined the crystal closely. "Maybe that's why this portal isn't active. Samuel must have tried and failed here." "Or someone else did," Sophie added, her voice echoing softly. As they explored the chamber, they found more of Samuel's notes hidden in a small alcove behind the pedestal. The notes were detailed, describing his experiments and the consequences of opening the portals. One entry mentioned a mysterious organization known as the Order of the Black Sun, dedicated to harnessing the power of these portals for their own purposes. "We need to find out more about this order," Emily said, her brow furrowed in concentration. "If they're still active, they could be a serious threat." Back in the main hall of the asylum, the friends heard a noise that made them freeze. Footsteps. Someone else was here. They quickly extinguished their flashlights and pressed themselves against the walls, straining to hear. Two men, dressed in dark, hooded robes, entered the hall, speaking in hushed tones. They carried with them strange, glowing artifacts that pulsed with an eerie light. "The Order," Jack whispered, his heart pounding. The friends watched as the men approached the pedestal. One of them placed an artifact on top of the cracked crystal, causing it to glow and hum with energy. The room trembled, and a swirling vortex began to form above the pedestal. "We have to stop them," Liam said, his voice urgent but quiet. Before they could act, one of the robed men turned, sensing their presence. "Who's there?" he demanded, his voice cold and authoritative. Jack stepped forward, drawing their attention away from the others. "Who are you, and what do you want?" The man lowered his hood, revealing a scarred, stern face. "We are the Order of the Black Sun. You are trespassing on sacred ground." "We know what you're doing," Emily said, stepping beside Jack. "You're trying to open a portal, just like Samuel Blackwood." The man's eyes narrowed. Blackwood was a fool. He didn't understand the true power of these portals. "But we do." Sophie and Liam, still hidden in the shadows, edged closer to the pedestal. They had to disrupt the ritual before it was too late. As the vortex grew, the air crackled with dark energy. "You're playing with forces you don't understand," Jack warned. "If you open that portal, you could unleash something terrible." The Order members laughed, their voices echoing ominously. "You have no idea what's at stake," the leader said. "We seek to control, not destroy." At that moment, Liam lunged forward, knocking the artifact off the pedestal. The vortex flickered and began to collapse in on itself. The chamber shook violently, and debris started to fall from the ceiling. "Run!" Jack shouted, grabbing Emily's hand. The friends dashed through the crumbling corridors, the sounds of the collapsing asylum and the shouts of the Order members behind them. They burst out into the open air just as the entrance caved in, sealing the asylum and its dark secrets within. Breathing heavily, they watched as the dust settled. "That was too close," Sophie said, her voice shaking. "But we stopped them," Liam said, looking at the wreckage. "For now." Emily held up one of the notes she had grabbed in the chaos. "This mentions another location. There are more of these portals, and the Order won't stop until they control them all." Jack nodded, his expression determined. "Then we won't stop either. We have to find these portals and shut them down, wherever they are." As they walked back to their car, the sun rising over the horizon, they knew their journey was far from over. The Order of the Black Sun was a powerful and dangerous enemy, but together they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. And so, the friends embarked on a new adventure, determined to uncover the mysteries of the portals and stop the Order from unleashing their dark power. Their bond, forged in the crucible of the orphanage and strengthened in the shadows of the asylum, would guide them through the darkness and into the light. The drive back to their temporary lodgings in a small Scottish village was quiet. Each friend was lost in their thoughts, contemplating the gravity of their mission and the ominous power of the Order of the Black Sun. Despite the exhaustion weighing on them, they knew there was no time to rest. That evening, gathered around a wooden table in the cozy inn they were staying at, they spread out the notes Emily had snatched from the asylum. The flickering light from the fireplace cast dancing shadows over the ancient documents. "We need to understand the Order's network," Jack said, studying one of the maps with marked locations. "They have to have a central point, a headquarters." "This note mentions a place called Darkmoor Castle," Emily said, pointing to a particularly detailed entry. Samuel Blackwood wrote about it being a major site for his experiments and, later, for the Order's activities. "Darkmoor Castle," Sophie mused. "I've read about it. It's in northern England, secluded and surrounded by legend. People say it's haunted." "It's our best lead," Liam said, folding the map carefully. "We should head there next." The journey to Darkmoor Castle was fraught with tension. The landscape shifted from the rugged highlands to the rolling hills of northern England. As they approached the castle, it loomed on the horizon, its ancient stone walls standing against the darkening sky like a sentinel of forgotten times. Darkmoor Castle was every bit as imposing as they had imagined. The air around it felt thick with history and hidden secrets.